Okay. Assalamualaikum and good day, everyone. This will be your first lecture with me, and we are going to proceed with chapter 1, which is the Malaysian legal system. Now, what is the importance of this chapter is that you will have to learn a few categories of law or a few areas of law under this subject, which includes the Malaysian legal system, contract law, company law, partnership law, corporate law, a bit of torts law, and also a bit of hire purchase law and also SOGA laws. Okay, so before we proceed with all those chapters, all those topics, you will need to have this basic understanding or fundamental understanding on what is the Malaysian legal system. Okay, so what is it that you'll learn in this chapter? The very basic one is that the topic outcome would be you will have to understand the law terms. Oops, sorry, the law terms and the legal terms which we will be using in this chapter in this subject, but not all, basically the most basic ones. Okay, next, the classifications and sources of Malaysian law. Now, why is it that you have to understand our classification and sources of law is because you would need to understand how does the law derives into being used in Malaysia, or what are the history of this law, how is it being implemented, how is it being adapted, or why, where does we from where did we get, or from where did we replicate this law, and how do we adapt it in Malaysia, how is it suitable to be used in Malaysia. As an example, um, our penal code is basically a replication of the Indian penal code. Why is it being used here in Malaysia? Why is it suitable to be used here in Malaysia? And how is it that we replicate Indian as opposed to other countries? Okay, so here you will need to understand the classification and the sources of why or how or what is this Malaysian law deriving from, or the history of Malaysian law. Okay, next is the Malaysian government system. Okay, being in Malaysia, I'm sure that you know that the Malaysian government system is actually a parliamentary government system. Okay, so you will need to understand what is a parliamentary government system, what is a monarchy government system. So all of the systems will be learned in this chapter. Okay, so next is the Malaysian judicial system. Because this is a law subject, you would have to understand, you must have this knowledge on what are the legal system of Malaysia, what are the hierarchy of the courts in Malaysia. Because why? You will need to understand if something's happened. As an example, if I give you a problem statement or a situation, a case study, you will have to answer in a way that you will have to direct me to which court or which suitable layers of court that I need to report my case to, or I need to bring upon my case to. Okay, so therefore you need to understand what are the judicial system in Malaysia, and what cases are governed under which court. Okay, so what are the suitability for certain cases to be brought forward to which court. Okay, so next, this is basically your topic outcome. Okay, it is actually a summary of what is it that I've put down here. Okay, so let's begin with classification of law. So classification of law, how many classes or categories of law that we have in Malaysia? So we have basically three. However, the last one, international law, can be divided into public international law, okay, categorized into two more divisions, which are public international law and private international law. So what is a public law? Public law is laws that govern, okay, laws that governed public as a large, as a whole or at large. As an example, uh, an individual being in a society, or groups of people being in society. But for private law, is about it's on laws that governs private individual. As an example, um, myself and my neighbor. So those are two private individuals. However, public laws, as an example, myself being in a society. As an example, myself being in the neighborhood of my of my house. As an example, me being in Shah Alam, so the Shah Alam society, that is public law. But for private law, myself being my own house, okay, in my own house, being in my own house, with another person being in their own house. Okay, so the same goes for international law, private international law and public international law. The same concept applies. However, there's another stage or there's another layer which we would have to foresee under private and public international law, which is the international part. Okay, for public and private law here, number one and number two is governing domestic laws, which means laws of the nation, only governing people in the nation, in Malaysia. However, for international law, it governs Malaysia with another country or another region or another nation, or Malaysia with many other regions. As an example, Malaysia suing Russian for the case of MH370 as an example. Okay, so those would be international law. Or a Malaysian citizen caught in another country, as an example, for selling drugs. Okay, what is it that will happen to our citizen in another country? So this will become an international issue. It will be governed under international law. Okay, next, sources of law. Okay, sources of law. So as you can see here, sources of law, there are two sources of law. Okay, we have written law and unwritten law. Okay, so for written law, it is clear here that something which is can be written down, something which is in hard copy form, or something which is in written form can be seen. Unlike the unwritten law, something which derives from your custom, okay, turun temurun, the history of your family, traffic offenses, as an example here, something which we cannot describe. Is each of the law, each situation is different. Therefore, the law needs to be governed according to each situation, as well as strict liability offenses. Okay, so let's go through one by one to the unwritten law. Strict liability offenses before we go before we proceed to written law. Strict liability offenses here means that in a given situation, if something's happen, what is it that can be done to to resolve or in result to or in order to resolve these offenses. As an example, strict liability. Yeah, I'm talking about strict liability now. Okay, strict liability means that if something happened in the company, who would this other third party look for, or who would be held responsible for this liability or for this for the offenses, the liability or the offenses. Strict liability means that without having to look into who actually did the liability or who actually did the offense, the law would look further into who is responsible in that current place. As an example, if let's say that you're working in a restaurant, okay, for hospitality student, you're working in a restaurant. So let's say that the review of the restaurant is very poor because the review given in the newspaper is very poor due to one mistake in a menu. So when this happened, without looking at the management of the hospital of the management of the restaurant, the public or the citizens at large, society at large, would be looking at the chef. We'll be looking at the chef. It might be a technical error. It might be uh, some error in delivery. Okay, as an example, yeah. However, when the food is reviewed or critiqued in a negative manner or in a bad manner, the burden of liability or offenses would be put upon the chef, directly to the chef. Okay, so that is strict liability offenses without having to see who is actually at fault. The law itself or the citizens itself will see as a general. As a general, strict liability on food would goes to the chef. Okay, so for written law, we have a few examples here. We have federal constitution, state constitution, legislation and subsidiary legislation, acts and statutes. Okay, so for federal constitution, this is your um, Perlembagaan Persekutuan. I'm sure most of you have heard of this federal constitution. If you're a Malaysian, you must be learning on Perlembagaan Persekutuan, because that is where you know what are your rights. Being in Malaysia, being a Malaysian citizens, your rights would be enlisted under this federal constitution, and each country, each nation would have their own FC. We call it federal constitution. So if you're a citizen of Malaysia, what are your rights will be written under FC. So if you're a citizen of Yemen, as an example, your rights or your whatever it is, um, your rights possessed under a citizen in your country, in Yemen, would be written under your federal constitution, your country's federal constitution. Okay, perlembagaan persekutuan ya guys. I'm sure most of you have heard of that. Okay, next is state constitution. State constitution, same goes for federal constitution, constitution of Malaysia. Each state would also have state constitution, and what is written under the state constitution must go through a parliamentary debate, or must go to the parliamentary process on how they pass this bill or whatever acts or whatever laws that is implemented in your state. So that's why I put here parliamentary, would still need to go to parliamentary, and there are a few processes or stages um, in order to complete this state constitution law to be an official or legally drafted document. So firstly, it has to go through a bill reading, and then a second reading, first reading, second reading, and third reading before the law, the state constitution, would be given approval. Okay, approval by the Agong or by the Sultan, and in under the law process we call it the royal assent. Okay, kebenaran daripada agung ataupun kebenaran daripada raja, approval from the head of the government. Head of the government is not our prime minister. Prime minister is an executive role. So head of the government would be agung. Okay, yang di-Pertuan Agong. Okay. Next is legislation and subsidiary legislation. Legislations are rang undang-undang. Okay, rang undang-undang legislations, which means that laws which is drafted, legislated in order to become legit legal documents. Okay, legit and legal documents, as opposed to subsidiary legislation. Okay, subsidiary legislation, this is the parent legislation and subsidiary legislation. As an example, we have University Act. University Act is the legislation, and the subsidiary legislation would be our students handbook here in MSU. Students handbook in MSU would be considered as subsidiary legislation, whereby it derives from the parent legislation. Whatever we have in subsidiary legislation would be adapted from legislation, parent legislation, and adopted by the subsidiary legislation in order to verify this legislation. Okay, in order to verify the legislation. Next is acts and statutes. Acta, okay, acta, and other statutes. Statutes would be ordinances as well. Okay, let me include here ordinances as well. Okay, so for those, if you're wondering, Madam, if let's say you're wondering, Madam, what are ordinances? So it is actually the same as acts, okay, and statutes. However, in Sabah and Sarawak, their acts, akta mereka, are called as ordinances. They do not call it as akta. So let's say we have here company law, okay, Companies Act 2016, the latest one, as an example. Yeah, so they would have uh, company ordinances 2016. It's just a different word. However, it's the same level, and the wordings is to determine from which part of Malaysian is this law from. Okay. So I hope everyone is clear on what are the classifications. Okay, there's three classifications, and what are sources of law. There's two sources of law. So let's proceed to state laws. Okay, so this is another state constitution here. Other names, it is also called as state laws. Okay, so what is it that is governed under state laws or state constitution? Number one is on religious matter, including family, division of property, hadanah, and rights to maintenance. Family here including divorce, adoption, guardianship, everything. uh, Everything, yeah. So division of property, if you're religious, if you're a Muslim, okay, it would be faraid. Okay, faraid. Hadana is like an insurance. Okay, it's like an insurance for the Muslims. Rights of maintenance, muta'ah, and all that. Okay, rights of maintenance, muta'ah, harta sepencarian, all of that, maintenance after divorce. Next, first is religious matters. Second is land law. Land law, there will be many examples. Anything regarding the land in that state would be governed under land law. State boundaries, as an example. State title, as an example. Strata title, or whatever title that your state or your land is holding, would be discussed under the state laws. Okay, let's proceed. So FC enshrines the basic or fundamental rights of an individual in Malaysia. Okay, YDPA owes his position to the FC and act according to it. Okay, YDPA here, Yang di-Pertuan Agong, means mm, the head of the country. His position is owed in FC, meaning that whatever his roles, his duties are all enlisted or discussed in FC already. So what he can do as a YDPA, as head of the country, is to follow through his duties as listed under FC, as stated under FC. Yeah. So FC can be amended if there is a two-third majority. Okay, two-third majority of the total number of members, legislative members. Legislative members ni maksudnya means that um, the composition of the cabinet. Okay, composition of the cabinet. If you want to know how much is it or how many is it, you would have to see the parliamentary debate. Okay, the parliamentary debate is for those who, okay, currently there's no problem for students to search for parliamentary debate. I'm sure you can also go to YouTube if you want, but for easy access, just switch on the TV every morning. Okay, every morning, and tune on to RTM. Okay, TV1 or TV2. That is where you can see all the parliamentary debate. Okay, and the one that you can watch in YouTube is not the full version. It's only like recorded version of certain interesting parts only. But if you're interested to know what is it that they discuss in parliamentary debate or in the parliament every morning, and as that is our money, our taxpayers' money, you can tune on to the TV1 and TV2 to watch it every morning. Okay, so what is the total number of seats currently in Malaysia? Okay, that one you will need to find out. I'll ask you in next class. Okay, what are the total numbers of seats? And also, what are the two-third majority that I'm saying here? This one is also your activity, your task for next tutorial class, yeah? Okay, so FC consists of articles pre-positioning religion of the Federation, welfare of the aborigines and other connected subjects. So articles pre-positioning religion of the Federation here means that what is Malaysia? What are the official religion of Malaysia? Is Malaysia an Islamic country? Okay, so articles here, why I highlighted articles? Articles is what we call things which is stated in FC. As an example, if things are enlisted in items enlisted in an act, we would call it Section 1, Section 2, Section 3. However, if things are enlisted, items are enlisted in FC, we would call them Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. That is as an example, yeah. We would have hundreds of articles, we also would have hundreds of sections, and all of it would be called as articles if there are in FC, and all of it would be called section if it is listed in an act. Okay. So what are the religion of the country, Malaysia? Okay, welfare of the aborigines. Okay, hak-hak orang-orang asli, aborigines. Okay, and also other connected subjects, things which are to protect rights of people, or um, to define what is it that Malaysia can do if such situations occurs. Okay. Right. Okay, every state has its own constitution. I'm sure I've already explained this. Every state in Malaysia, all 13 of states, okay? The provision comprises the ruler, the executive council, the legislator, and other related subjects like legislative assembly, financial provision, state employees, and amendment of the constitution. So provision comprises ruler and executive councils. Here mean those who will be ruling, okay, the political party at that moment, or whatever is the government at that moment. As an example, if let's say it is ruled by one specific political party, uh, then they have to go through all the cabinet members, all the the YB, the the important representative of the state for each of the constituents in the state, all the rulers. Okay, maksudnya each and every not state, uh, division of the state. As an example, Shah Alam is one, Klang is one. Although it is in one same state, which is Selangor, the division of the state, the constituents of the state, each constituents need to be discussed. Executive Council here means those who will be drafting the constitution, the state constitution. So, delegated legislation is a legislation made by individual or bodies under powers given to them by the Act of Parliament. Delegated legislations here are the people who will be drafting your law. As an example, for Selangor, it will be the Selangor Bar Council. Okay, it is important because the legislation made by Parliament and the state is not enough to give the laws needed to govern everyday matters. So, if this is the case, okay, it is important because the legislation made by Parliament and the state is not enough, as it is only the rulers, only the executive council, and the legislator. So these people needed help from those who can actually draft proper laws. Okay, so here is where the bar council, the legal drafters or the law drafters, comes in handy in order to sort out or in order to cater for this legislation duties. Okay, so next. Okay, we will go through the next topic of our chapter, which is division of law practices. Division of law practices. So the division of law practices here, I enlisted five here because if in final exam or in test, I would ask for five. However, there are more, okay, more divisions of law practices, but it is compulsory for you to know this basic main five. Number one, litigation. Okay, number one is litigation. Number two is conveyancing. Number three is corporate. Number four is family matters. And number five is Sharia. Sharia is under Islamic matters. So litigation, I'm sure most of you have heard of peguam bela, peguam cara. Okay, for those Malaysian, peguam bela is actually litigation. Okay, peguam bela. Peguam cara is actually conveyancing. So what litigation officers do or litigation lawyers do, they go to court and litigate or mitigate cases. Okay, for conveyancing, lawyers, peguam cara, what they do is they'll only it's not only they will prepare bundle, okay, bundle of arguments and also bundle to be presented to the court. However, they wouldn't be the one talking, okay, talking to defend you in court. They'll be the one admin lawyers, we call them. Okay, admin lawyers, we call them. So all they do is documentation. They wouldn't be going to court and be defending clients or counsels. They wouldn't be counsels. Yeah. Corporate here means anything which governs the corporate law, may it be company law, commercial law, corporate law, partnership law. All those laws are governed under here. Corporate practices. Okay, all the businesses, everything in here. Family matters. Okay, this one includes all the marriage, adoption, and everything for non-Muslim. And Sharia here includes everything under the Islamic law. Okay, the four pillars under this is the Islamic law. The four pillars are marriage. Okay, marriage is one of them for Muslim, yeah, but for non-Muslim it will be here under family matters. Okay, so marriage. What others? Hudud laws, everything under Sharia law should be here. Yeah, faraid and everything. So that is the second part of your lecture, let's proceed to the third part, which is our Malaysian government system. You would have to watch this video by yourself, and then after that I will include this as one of the case study. Okay, one of the case study. I would like to know your opinion after you watch the video, and you would have to to complete this Google form. Okay, I'll upload a Google form later on in GCR, your Google Classroom, together with this video, so that so that you have to watch the video, and then you would have to answer the questions. This will be an activity later on, yeah. So I'll just proceed to the Malaysian government system. So there are three governmental system in Malaysia. The first government system is legislative, second is executive, third is judicial. So the separation of powers between these three is needed. Why? Because these are three different departments. Okay, three different departments. So separation of powers. The three main branches of the government needs to be divided. Okay, it cannot be overlapping. Each branches are giving responsibilities and are afforded with powers by the government. Okay, so let's say as an example, if you're in legislative, okay, if you're in legislative, your role here is to legislate law or enact law, amend or make new laws. Okay, so this is your role. But if you're an executive, your role is to enforce or to implement whatever which is whatever laws enacted by the legislative bodies. Okay, if you're in judicial, okay, if you're in judiciary body, your role would be to interpret the law, okay, to use the law into action, to use the law in order to no, sorry, not legit, to decide for cases, or to practically use the law and make it um, as in practice and interpret the law to public. Yeah. Okay, so this is the same three governmental system. Okay. Okay, among the famous question that I would ask in test or final exam would be the separation of powers between these three governmental system. So number one, as I explained earlier, the legislative is the body which will enact new laws or amend existing laws, also act as a mechanism to oversee government activities. So they are called the legislator in Malaysia, is the parliament. Okay, and the supreme law of Malaysia is the federal constitution. Whatever law which will be drafted or which you propose to draft, okay, cannot be, it must be in accordance with federal constitution. It cannot be in conflict with the federal constitution. Okay, so this is the picture of our parliament. Okay, if you notice the picture, our parliament is at the 50-cent note. Okay, the 50-cent note. This is the parliament. This is the logo of the parliament. Okay, and for the logo, each of the elements in the logo symbolizes something in Malaysia, something significant in Malaysia. Yeah. Okay. Second is the executive. Who are the executive? As I stated earlier, the law enforcers. They implement the law. This is the keyword. They implement the laws that have been enacted by the legislator. Okay. So their main role is to maintain public order or public security. Examples of this executive body is RMP, Royal Malaysian Police, the Army, the Mayor, okay, and unit by uniform. Okay, all those listed under the executives of the government. Okay, so these are some examples: Royal Polis Diraja Malaysia, RMP, Royal Malaysian Police, Angkatan Tentera Malaysia, the Army, Suruhanjaya Pencegah Rasuah Malaysia. Okay, Immigration Malaysia, JPJ Malaysia, Jabatan Pengangkutan Jalan Malaysia. Okay, so the third one is the judiciary. Okay, so you have first legislator, Okay, the first division, your legislator, and then we have the second, executive, and we have lastly the judiciary. So what is it which is governed under judiciary? So the judiciary, what is it that they do is that they interpret the enacted laws. Okay, interpret the enacted laws. They practices the law that have been enacted by legislator, the law in practice, yeah, not the law in theory. They practice, they use it. Their main role is to uphold justice and fairness within the society, especially within the legal framework. Okay, so examples of the judiciary bodies are judges, DA, District Attorney, DPP, Deputy Public Prosecutor, and prosecution services, whatever may be public prosecutor or whatever prosecution services, okay, and ETC. There's a lot. Those who are involved in practically using the laws. As an example, if you ask me, Madam, what about lawyers? Lawyers as well. They'll be listed under this category. They'll be under judiciary as well. All the law drafters as well. They're all here in judiciary. Okay, so who are they? Example here, Bar Council, Majlis Peguam Negara, okay, or Jabatan Peguam Negara, okay, Jabatan Peguam Negara. Okay, so why is it important to separate powers? Okay, why is it important to separate powers? Here, why is it that we need to have a triangulation or a cooperation or collaboration between all the bodies? However, all the bodies must be acting solely or for their own purpose. There cannot be an overlapping. Okay, there cannot be an overlapping of task or joint forces there or joint powers there. Because why? All the powers of the government in one place is a bad idea. It is better to segregate what they do. Okay, why? These are the four logics. Okay, the four logics behind why. Importance of SOP is actually a KBKK question. It's a question whereby you can answer even without having uh, any basic knowledge of law. Why? Because it is something that you can actually discuss by yourself. Why is it that you think it is important to have separation of power? So number one, provide check and balance tools. Okay, to provide check and balance tool. Number two, check and balance tools here means that, as an example, I'm in judiciary. What I can do is I can actually provoke. Okay, no, sorry, not provoke. I can actually request it for legislation of laws drafted by the legislators to be amended, not for purposes of provoking, but for purposes of improving the law to become a better set of law. Okay, so to provide check and balance tools, not just judiciary providing check and balance to legislator. It could be the other way around. It could be in any manner, as stated in this diagram. Yeah. Okay, to prevent misuse of powers. Okay, if let's say all powers are allocated at one place, definitely misuse of powers would happen easily. However, if it is separated into three or separated into different categories or different areas of work or different focus of work, therefore it is very difficult for misuse of powers to happen, because a lot not no, the power is not centralized into one place. It is not centralized at all. It is actually decentralized into many places. Okay, so very difficult for the ministers or any ministries to misuse their power. Balance and limits power. Yeah, as this is the explanation as well to the previous point. Avoid ultra virus acts. Okay, what are ultra virus acts? Ultra virus acts are acts which is not in accordance, okay, actions which is not in accordance to whatever which is supposed to be. As an example, okay, as an example, as a police officer, you would have to arrest people with reasonable suspicion. However, how is it that you prove reasonable suspicions in certain cases? As an example, as a police, you might tend to know people and you might tend to misuse your power to capture or to retain people without their will, beyond their will. Okay, just because you're a police. As an example, if you have a problem with your neighbor, as an example, and because you're a policeman, as an example, I'm a policeman. Yeah, I would. In some cases, I might use my power, okay, my power, to get to my neighbors. As an example, report them on something. Okay, as I know the law, being a police, report them on something and make sure that they're captured under custody. Okay, so ultra virus in literal meaning means beyond. Okay, beyond what is provided to you. Okay, so beyond actions, okay, or lack of actions provided to you under the act itself. Okay, so if let's say the act provide you to, you may MCO, yeah, as an example, you may go in one car, two parties in one car, or two people in one car. So in order to ensure that the police as well is avoiding ultravirus, so they themselves have to follow the law. No one is actually beyond or above the law. Everyone is actually um is under this conquer of law in Malaysia. Okay. So next, I'm done with this one. Okay, issues to be discussed. This one also we will be discussing this on next class. We will use at least 1 hour to discuss all these questions. Okay, so what will happen when there are two branches afforded in the same role with the same role, overlapping powers, dual functions, ultra-virus acts. Other branches can step in and interrupt when the other branches is doing their work. Okay, so what would happen? This is some things to ponder, and we'll discuss this in next class. Yeah. Okay. So power to make judgments on the law, power to make change, to make and change law, the parliament, and power to put law into action, the executive government. So this is one illustration only. Yeah. Okay. Next. Next, our Malaysian legal system. So our Malaysian legal system, we are adapting mixed legal system here. Okay, mixed legal system. So what is it that we have in our mixed legal system? We have a bit of common law. Common law here is also known as English law. Okay, why? Because I'm not assuming. Yeah, it's because of our history. Okay, because of our history. Based on our history, we have been colonized by the British. So because of that, we are using English law, common law, we call it. Yeah, Sharia law, Islamic law, and why? Because Islam is the biggest religion here in Malaysia, and also it is our official religion in Malaysia. Okay. Next, customary law. Customary law, which means that we in Malaysia, we is still holding strong to our customs. Okay, as an example, if there are some of you here uh, who are from, let's say, whatever state, each state have their own customs. As an example, in Negeri Sembilan we have adat pepatih, adat temenggung. Okay, in Perak we have Mak Yong. Okay, so each of the state themselves carries different customs. Okay, so this is what we have in Malaysia. Why? Because we have too many separation of we have too uh, multi nation not nation multi religion, and also multi-racial here in Malaysia. So we have a lot of customs to be discussed under mixed legal system, and we do not want any of the custom to feel like they are not welcome here in Malaysia. So because of that, we have it under here, customary law. So that is our mixed legal system. Yeah. Next, types of courts in Malaysia. Okay, so types of courts we have the common court system. Okay, the common court system, which is this one. This is the common court system. I'll explain later. The industrial court, which governs all matters of private laws. Okay, private, which are um, matters that the business owners or company owners would have to deal with. Industrial courts. Okay. Next, special courts. Special courts governs only these four categories of people. So martial court, juvenile court, royal court, and orang asli court, ethnic court, court. Yeah. So under court, this is for the unit per uniform. Marshal, this is for the marshal, for the army, for the police. This is where they put their. This is where they are taken for whenever they are conducting any court session. Juvenile court, I'm sure all of you are very sure, not very sure, sorry. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with what is a juvenile court. Okay. Juvenile court is for uh, not children, for parties who are under uh, be who are 16 and below years old. Okay. Royals Court, this is for the royals, but not all the royals. As an example, TMJ, okay, he's a famous royal in Malaysia. TMJ will have to go to normal court system. The only royals that will get to be in this royal court or royal SS here would be our actual king. Okay, actual king. Contohnya, as an example, the Sultan of Pahang is now the Agong. So he is the actual king of Pahang. Okay, same goes for Kelantan. Sultan Kelantan, the father, not the anak. Okay, only the one in proper lineage or the one who is currently in lineage. Okay, on the throne currently. Orang Asli Court, this is for the Aborigines, for Orang Asli, those who are born here in Malaysia, who has land here in Malaysia. Okay, Orang Asli, ethnics, Aborigines in Malaysia. Okay, next. Okay, common court hierarchy. This is a common court hierarchy. We will start, our discussion will start from below, yeah, bottom. So for the common court hierarchy, there are two divisions here. We have the subordinate court, Mahkamah Rendah. Okay, if you yang selalu dengar is Mahkamah Rendah. And we also have the superior courts, Mahkamah Tinggi. Okay, so Mahkamah Tinggi, Mahkamah Rendah. So under Mahkamah Rendah, under subordinate court, we have two. We have the magistrate court and we have the sessions court. Okay. So that is governed under your subordinate court. Your superior court, Mahkamah Tinggi, we would begin with High Court of Malaya and High Court of Sabah and Sarawak. Why is it divided? It is divided because High Court will be using a lot of a lot of acts and ordinances, and each state will have their own High Court. That is why we call it High Court of Malaya and also High Court of Sabah and Sarawak. As an example, in Kelantan, there will be a few courts, and those courts are still under High Court of Malaya. High Court of Sabah and Sarawak would define all the constituents would justify all the constituents under Sabah and Sarawak. Okay, so for session court and magistrate court, this is called subordinate court. Okay, superior courts would begin from High Court, proceeding to Court of Appeal. Court of Appeal is Mahkamah Raya 1. This is where if you're not satisfied with the verdict or the judgment that you receive from High Court, you can actually appeal, okay, appeal merayu to Court of Appeal. Okay, Mahkamah Raya 1. Next, if you're still not satisfied with the judgment or with the decision under Court of Appeal, you may proceed to Federal Court. And that is the final court that you can proceed your summons or your claim or your legal action to. In Malaysia, we practice tripartite three times appeal. So first, two times appeal. Tripartite means satu dua tiga. Tripartite 1 2 3. Three courts. You can go to three courts. Means you can only have two appeals. Your actual originating summon would be in example, yeah, would be in magistrate court. So let's say if you're not satisfied, what you can do is, okay, first appeal in session court. Okay, second appeal, if you're not satisfied again, you can appeal to High Court. Okay, so after that, if you're still not satisfied, you will just have to live with that decision for the rest of your life. Okay, why? Because in Malaysian court system, we only allow double appeal. Okay, and tripartite court system. Tripartite here means only three courts can be involved. So from the magistrate court, from the session court to the High Court. That's it. Okay, special court system here, as I explained, these are the special court system. It governs these four matters: martial, juvenile, royals, and rangs. The Aborigine, you can put this here. Okay, so if let's say I ask you on what are the court system of Malaysia, you would have to answer this one, the common court system, as well as industrial court, as well as special courts, which is this one. Okay, martial, juvenile, royals, and also orang asli. So if you have any question, that's it for today. That's it for court hierarchy. So I would like to end my lecture with a quote from Lord Acton. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Okay, power itself is already a very corrupted thing. Power itself is a very bad thing and can turn a person into very evil. So absolute power will absolutely corrupts. Okay, absolute power means a power derived a centralized power only solely in invested in one party or one person would definitely absolutely corrupts. Okay, rather than the power which is decentralized or shared or divided into certain areas or certain portions of the country. Okay, so thank you so much for your kind attention. I'll be taking Q&A now. Let me end my video sharing for a while. Hold on, yeah.